Everybody, welcome back to the Rhode Island Computer Museum. Today, Sam has brought us another item from the warehouse. This is a IBM 5150 PC. I personally don't know a whole lot about this machine, but Sam is very well versed in it, and he's going to give me some specs and tell me and you all about it.
Oh, no pressure whatsoever.
No pressure.
So I have a few of these machines in my own collection, so I do know a little bit about the IBM PC. So the IBM Pc 5150, which is what we have right here, was released in 1981. And it was after IBM finally saw that there was going to be a market in the home personal computer market. And believe it or not, up until this point, they were still kind of iffy as to whether personal computers were going to be a thing they could actually make profit off of. But they wanted to rush one to market, so they actually did a private team develop this machine. And the PC 5150 changed personal computing from that point forward. And that's for several reasons. So before we get into that, let's take a look at the machine itself. So right here you have probably one of the most iconic keyboards you're ever going to find for a computer, and this is the Model F keyboard. Now this keyboard uses the same mechanisms for the keys as the IBM typewriters, and that is a buckling spring. And so it is actually a mechanical spring underneath, and it has that signature sound right there, which a lot of people like. Some people find really annoying, but personally I think it's great. The later Model M keyboards are very popular as well, but this is the original keyboard, the Model F. And here you have the main unit, and the main unit has two 5.25-inch floppy drives right in the front, and on top of that you have the monochrome display, and this is what you would typically find with the 5150. Though you could get monochrome graphics cards to actually support graphics, and you could get CGA monitors and later even an EGA monitor for the 5150 PC line. Now there were several revisions to this machine. There was the PC XT and the PC 8T, which is a little bit different in terms of architecture and hardware. But essentially all PC line computers are backwards compatible, and of course there are many clone computers of the PC, and they all utilize DOS pretty much as an operating system. So many of them were compatible as long as you had the correct amount of RAM and graphics support and things like that.
So a machine like this, is this 286 or is this something earlier?
No, this is something earlier. This is an Intel 8088 processor running at 4.77 megahertz. There is no sound card unless you want to get one added. There is a PC speaker for simple sounds, but there would be no music with this or anything like that.
Beeps and boops, pretty much.
Beeps and boops, pretty much. That's the PC speaker's one channel sound wave generator. Just beeps and boops and things like that. So some games might have little sound effects here and there. You could get external speakers and a sound card, and you could do that via the expansion slots. In the back of the machine, there are 5 expansion slots, much like the Apple II. So you could customize this machine. Unlike where a Commodore 64 had the graphics chip and the sound chip, it was great for games, it was limited to pretty much what you could put into the floppy drive and what you could put into the cartridge slot. Whereas this machine had expansion slots. So you could upgrade the graphics, you could upgrade the RAM, which almost was a necessity because this thing came with between like 64K and maybe 256K standard on the machine, but it was expandable up to 640K, which at the time was much more than you would need. The floppy drives themselves were 360K drives, so if you had DOS on a disk, even took up the whole disk, you could load that maybe 360K, so you're still looking at another 300K or so of memory remaining.
And what year was this machine from?
This was from 1981, and this line was supported up until the mid to late 80s.
So something like this, so maxing out at 640K when the Commodore a year later was only 64K.
That's right.
Out of hand.
Now again, the price of this computer was between $4,000 and $10,000, and that is a lot of money. So if you were to get a base model, and you could get a base model with no floppy drives,
what would you even use for input?
There's a cassette port in the back, and this was the only line of the only model of the IBM PC that had a cassette port, because you could buy a bare bones model of this that would have probably no monitor. It would probably have to buy a third-party monitor, and would have no floppy drive, and you could have it with just a cassette port, and probably 64K of memory on here, and it probably still going to cost you around $4,000. So this machine was basically marketed towards business users.
I was going to say, I feel like businesses are the only ones that can really pay the price, and even something like this sitting on your desk versus a Commodore 64 seems much more impressive to have. The whole setup and everything here versus just the computer keyboard of Apple even.
Right. This was definitely geared towards business users, which is again the typewriter keys. It definitely was a work-oriented machine. But later on, because it was expandable, people found you could put in some graphics cards and sound cards, and it could be a capable games machine, even a gamepad or some kind of game controller with the expansion slots. But because there are only 5 expansion slots, you were kind of limited in reality, because you would need one of those expansion slots automatically for a floppy drive controller to control the 2 floppy drives. That's not built into the motherboard. That's an actual card that would be put in there. Because the floppy drives technically were an option if you were to buy the machine, so you would need that card in there. You would need a card in for the displays. That's 2 cards right there. If you want to add more memory, that's a 3rd card. So you're down to maybe 2 cards. If you want to put a printer in there, you're down to 1 card slot left. So it sounds like there's a lot of 5 options to expand, but a lot of the things that you would need in a computer are not built into this as they are with like a Commodore 64. Everything was pretty much added in externally.
Now, was there any kind of expansion unit to add more capabilities, or is this just what you got?
There is it's a kind of a rare item to find nowadays, which maybe we'll have to do a video on it because we do have one in the warehouse, which I actually saw the other day because I thought it was a PC, but it is not. It is an expansion unit for the IBM 5150 and the later model is 5160. And it looks just like this, except it says expansion unit on the little badge here instead of IBM personal computer. I believe it says personal computer expansion unit. It looks just like this, but where there's 2 floppy drives, it's either a hard drive or a floppy drive or 2 hard drives or something like that. But the original PC 5150 is more of an iconic machine than it is a functional machine. Now, you can get games for this, but you're basically limited to what you can stick in the machine in terms of a floppy disk.
It seems like a machine that had expansion, but was also limited by the technology at the time.
It was. I mean, the way this machine was developed, again, it was geared towards business users.
So this machine, would this be considered pretty much I know it's the first PC, but there was PCs before this. So what makes this really the first PC?
So this is definitely not the first personal computer in terms of what you could use at home. Apple did actually call their computers personal computers or the personal computer and things like that. But the IBM PC actually was branded as a personal computer. And what they mean by PC is the first PC. It's the first to use this kind of architecture, meaning it's the first to have a motherboard with a power supply and storage devices, but is the first to also have these expansion slots for pretty much everything else. So if you were to buy and build your own computer, you're going to buy a case, you're going to buy a shell, you're going to buy a motherboard or a logic board, and it's going to have your processor on it, maybe some memory, and then it's basically going to have expansion slots like this, and where you're going to have to add your own sound card, graphics card, you're going to have to add your own expansion for memory. You could exchange storage devices and put different storage devices. And in fact, if you want, you can take out these floppy drives and put maybe half height, 3.5-inch floppy drives. There is a way to do that kind of thing, especially with later models of the PC. And some people did. They kept their IBMs and just upgraded to a 3.5-inch floppy drive. So it's the first in terms of architecture and layout like that, where your graphics card was not built into the machine like with a Commodore 64. Your graphics card's built in. Pretty much every computer was like that. But the IBM PC is the first to use this type of architecture that we still use today. And it's because it's the most customizable, and that is something that a lot of people like with their computers.
The most modular.
It's the most modular, correct. So if you were a tower PC, it's going to be set up almost the same exact way. And it's almost, even nowadays, you could get a 3.5-inch floppy drive, granted a smaller one, and put it into a tower PC with some adapters and things like that. It's doable. This is the first PC, means the first to use that type of architecture as opposed to other computer companies.
Really interesting. I didn't realize that about the machine. Just really, this is the beginning, so to speak, of what is like the modern PC market now. Because
so many companies cloned the IBM PC, every other company pretty much developed their computer the same way. So you had a market flooded with computers that had their graphics cards and sound cards all separate, and again, you could customize it. And of course, companies would now make graphics cards that were interchangeable for any DOS machine. So this computer line became widely supported because it was cloned so much. This is the start of personal computing in terms of what we know it as it is today. It's definitely at the start of home computers or computers you could use personally. It's the start of a whole generation of and a whole slew of personal computers with this type of architecture. Can be quite expensive to collect for, though. So it's for just a display item, you're going to be spending quite a bit. In fact, these keyboards can cost upwards of $80 to replace. They are very expensive to replace.
Luckily, very durable, though.
They are very durable. They are very heavy. They're as heavy as some computers are. This is probably heavier than your laptop. The computers themselves are probably the cheapest thing to get, in my experience, because the monitors, shipping these is extremely expensive. And if someone knows what they have, they know that, if they have this monitor, you're not going to want to buy one online, so you're going to have to pay a premium to maybe pick it up. If you have to drive an hour to get the monitor, drive the hour.
So many are broken in shipping.
Yeah, in fact, if you can find, for pretty much any computer system you want to collect for, if you find just a monitor for sale locally with no computer, buy the monitor if it's cheap enough. Because the computer you can ship. The monitor, if you can get that local, always go for the monitor. But for the computer itself, if you want a complete setup, you're probably going to look around $200, if not more. And I think that's a fair price if you can get everything in here and working. For the most part, these PCs work on startup. There are issues you might run into. You might have bad memory. You might have bad RAM. Starting your computer up, you might get an error with bad memory. The disk drives might be dirty. But for the most part, these things they're pretty solid. I mean, you might have
machine and clean the floppy disks.
Yeah, you might have a couple. I mean, you might have random things like capacitor might be bad here and there. But there's no. I haven't run into too many issues with these just being faulty right out the gate. These are very sturdy, very durable machines. But if you want to get into vintage computing, you might look into a later model, something that has more options.
An XT or something similar.
Yeah, something like that. The 5150 you can modify. It can technically run some things, but personally, I think it's just a beautiful machine. It's better just to have on a shelf, maybe power on once in a while to show the green phosphor display here. It is a fun machine to collect for, but they take up a lot of space. They're very heavy and can be kind of expensive to collect for. And the IBM hasn't gotten as collectible, I'd say, as Apple has, but it's getting up there. I definitely think the IBM market for collectability has gone way up.
All right, so that is the IBM 5150, the original PC, so to speak. I do appreciate Sam bringing this item in from the warehouse, getting it ready to go, ready for us to look at. We're going to have a lot more stuff coming up soon, other IBMs, other machines, so keep an eye on the channel, keep an eye on the Facebook page, like, comment, subscribe, share the videos with your friends if you think they'll like them too. We really do appreciate the watch, and we'll see you guys next time.